What's up, y'all? Cam here. I've got another video for you. This one's going to be on Gnomeregan. Now, the first thing I'm going to cover is the DPS performance that we're seeing in the first 2 weeks. Then I'm going to go ahead and talk about what I think about the raid. Is it fun? Is it difficult? Is there too much trash? Too little trash? Although I don't think I've ever heard anyone complain about too little trash. But we're going to talk about that. And then I'm going to go ahead and just have a video clip of each of our kills, and I'm going to talk about which are the main mechanics you should be paying attention to. I'm going to point them out as they're happening, and hopefully that can help some of you guys. Because there are a lot of guides around right now that are like, don't avoid this, don't get hit by this, blah blah blah. But I want to point it out as it's happening in the video, and maybe that'll connect with some people a little bit better as they're trying to understand these mechanics. Let's go ahead and talk about the DPS now. You have Melee Hunter, which is well above and beyond everything else. I've seen Melee Hunter in action. They are extremely powerful. With them being one of the only melee classes at the top of the meters right now, I expect them to definitely get adjusted. Now, you have casters below Melee Hunter with Warlock, Fire Mage, Priest, Elemental Shaman, and Arcane Mage. Now, casters themselves are usually pretty powerful early on in expansions or phases in this case, so it's not too surprising there. Also, we did see them allow bleeds and poisons to hit the Gnomeregan mobs, and it does seem that they took those immunities and removed them, but also put additional armor on these mobs to counteract just melee being meta again. So I do think that it makes sense that casters are on top here. And my final point to this is that, as with every phase expansion we've ever seen, you've got warriors and rogues that are just going to continue to scale because they just do really well as they gain additional stats. Like, they just scale very powerfully. So I expect this to shift as you see those warriors, rogues, etc. get geared up. So let's talk about the bosses themselves really quickly. So first off, I think most of these bosses are easy. You can see I've got Grubbis, Viscous Fallout, and Pummeler listed as easy. These bosses have very basic mechanics that are relatively easy to dodge if you know what you're doing, and don't require a hard DPS check. I mean, technically Grubbis enrages, but at least for our group, we had no issue whatsoever with that. You can also use nature protection potions on him if you want. Now, I'd say that these first two fights are pretty boring. Nothing really exciting. Just kill the ads or, handle the mechanic properly, which we'll get into at that point in the video. The Electrocutioner is a little more complex, especially when they fix the LOS mechanic, which, I'll talk about later. But I think this one can be quite fun and entertaining. The first time we did this, we weren't using like the cheese. We were doing it normally, and I was running out to group up for the chain lightning as a feral druid, which was fun, like timing that and getting, having to run around and all that. So this one is a little bit more complex than the others because if you mess up, people will just straight up die. So that's why it's a medium difficulty. Crowd Pummeler, while it's easy, is one of the most fun fights I've seen. He's got a few mechanics that can knock you off the platform, and it's a pretty small platform. So like, people were just dying. Every time I battle res someone on this fight, they just took another L and died. So I found this fight quite fun, although it is really easy. You really shouldn't be getting hit by anything. Maybe like one cog as they spawn, but that's it. Now, the last two bosses definitely have a much higher difficulty level. The Menagerie requires that you handle 4 mobs at the same time that have mechanics that can really mess you up if you have them too close to each other, too far away from each other, or they just have weird interactions that I'm not sure anyone fully understands yet, but I'll do my best to explain them when we get to that point. And then lastly, you have Mekgineer Thermaplugg, who has like 4 phases essentially. You have to kill him, I think at 250% of his health you have to do in total. But anyway, he seems like a pretty fun fight, but nothing crazy interesting. It's about execution, getting the bombs properly, hitting the buttons properly, tank swapping properly, and all that fun stuff. So I think overall this raid is good. I would rate it probably not as It's hard to say. I'd rate it probably not as good as BFD, but we did BFD so many times that it's kind of got a little bit of a sour, boring taste in my mouth because near the end I was just exhausted by it. So I'd say this is probably slightly above BFD because of those memories. But I would say it's not very difficult except for those last two bosses, which is what we saw also in BFD. I tend to like how they handle that. I tend to think it's fine. Now, as far as trash goes, I'd say that there is a healthy amount of trash in Gnomer. Our first run, we cleared way too much, but if you do go certain routing, and I'm sure there'll be better routing than we have now, you can skip a lot of that trash and it sped it up quite a bit. So I think if my initial thought was Gnomer was going to be horrible for trash, like 10 out of 10 bad, too much trash, I would say that on our second run when we were a little more comfortable, it was more like a 5 or a 6. Like, it's a healthy amount of trash, more than I'd like to kill, but definitely manageable. Go ahead and talk about Grubbis. Now, Grubbis is a Trog, and he comes with his pet Chomper, who's a Basilisk. We had our off tank, which was me in this case, tanking the Basilisk. He has a Petrify that puts, it's like an 8-second stun, magical effect, so it is dispellable by priests. I also think that you can interrupt it, but I wasn't running Skull Bash here because I didn't quite know all the mechanics. But the main mechanic of this boss is that green cloud that you see hovering off to the right, or kind of all over as I'm spinning, is you need to taunt this Trog. You'll watch me do it. I taunt him. You bring them into the green cloud. It'll explode, and that will dissipate the poison cloud. And essentially, if that cloud reaches the boss, then you'll see him get a buff and rage and he'll do additional damage. So really, you should have anyone besides the main tank. It doesn't have to be the off tank. It really shouldn't be the off tank, but a hunter with distracting shot or something along those lines to pull those Trogs towards the poison clouds. To remove them is the play. And then as the off tank, or have the off tank, just keep taunting off the Basilisk and keep dispelling or interrupt that Petrify. That's really all this boss has. He does enrage later on in the fight at under 20%, but not much issue. You can use a greater nature protection potion as well. For the Fallout boss, the main mechanic you're going to want to focus on is that he'll summon 3 oozes around him in a triangle pattern, and essentially you'll want to swap to those as soon as they come up. So you can see him casting it here. You'll see 3 oozes spawn. I immediately swap to 1. Now, if these guys make it to the bracers on the ground, you can see that's right where he's headed, and this one actually does change. He'll turn into an elemental that'll start casting a disease nature damage dot, basically, called Radiation Burn. You can see we all got to stack our entire raid there, but it is interruptible. So you want to kill these before they get to the bracers, but if you get 1, maybe 2 if you have a mage that can actually hit 1 with counterspell at the right time, then it's manageable, but I would say you should be able to get down to just 1 relatively easily. Now his other mechanic, which you saw here, is Sludge. Now for Sludge, it's just he poops green poison on the ground and you need to move him out of it. It's really as simple as that. And that's all this boss really does. We're going to continue to move him here, and then you'll see he'll do 1 more rotation of slimes. I think he's at like 15% when he does it. We probably could have bursted the boss from that point, but playing it safe, we decided just kill the oozes, and we did, and then we went ahead and knocked out the boss. So relatively simple one here. Just make sure your DPS are switching to the ads. One note as well, these are not immune to stuns and slows, so you should be really using those effectively here and trying not to stack them as well. This is my favorite boss in the raid, Crowd Pummeler. Now his main mechanic is called Gnomeregan Smash, and what you'll see is he winds up, turns his body, and like gets an electrical charge on his hand. Essentially he blasts in front of him. You can see our warrior got hit. I end up B-resing this dude and he dies again. Freaking Rachel Star, man. But anyway, he does Gnomeregan Smash. You'll want to be behind him or to the side of him during this cast. So basically you're looking for the part of his feet, and that's what everyone will tell you, by the way, is don't look at his head because he turns his head. But if you look at his feet, you'll see like this plate that overhangs. You want to be on the opposite side of that, the back of him, obviously. So that's the number one thing. Beyond that, you'll have cogs that show up on the platform here, and they'll just move around, and you'll get more as the fight goes on. This is really easy to dodge. They're not nearly as blocking as the bubbles from the turtle boss in BFD, but they do have a similar mechanic that if you get knocked up by one, you can kind of get chained into getting knocked off. So those are his two main mechanics, and then as he gets low, he has a third one that's called Claw. Basically, for this, what he'll do is he'll just target one raider and he'll attack them, grab them, and just start doing good big damage to them. So you can either save healing cooldowns for this, like pain suppression or something similar, or you can just use bubble or vanish or bop or feign death to avoid it as it's happening. And what you'll see here is he'll go to grab one of our warriors in just a second on the right there. Right now, right here, you can see the warrior gets grabbed. We bop him so he doesn't get grabbed, and that's the mechanic. That's Claw for you. Now, if you're Horde, you will have to heal him through that instead, but relatively straightforward fight, but fun because you can just see, there goes another, there goes Rachel's star again. It's just a fun fight. Let's go ahead and talk about Electrocutioner now. So this guy's main mechanic is, you can see it right there, static arc. He targets the furthest person away, shoots them with the chain lightning essentially that hits the two closest targets to that person, so 3 total. Now you get a debuff that lasts for 20 seconds after you get hit by this, and essentially if you get hit by another one, and it's cast I think every 15 or so seconds, you'll just straight up die from this. So the way it's supposed to work mechanically is you have someone stand the furthest away, they have 2 people that are either near them or ready to run to them when the cast starts. They get the debuff, they cycle closer to the boss, and then you have people come back. Someone stand the furthest away that doesn't have the debuff, they get targeted. 2 people come towards them that don't have the debuff as well, they soak, and you just keep swapping. Now that is great and all, but as it currently works, there's a pipe that's near the elevator, and essentially you just have someone stand near the pipe within LOS of the boss. He'll target him with that static arc, and then you just walk behind the pipe and it completely negates the entire mechanic. You see it there, boom, walk behind the pipe, and he's good. Now, the other 2 mechanics, number 1, you'll have a pushback, a knockback. It'll throw you back, I don't know, like 30-ish yards, does some damage. Nothing super crazy to be concerned about here, but you'll want your tank to be tanking them against the wall so that he doesn't get pushed back. And then the final mechanic here is essentially a electromagnetic field, which you can see went on Agroholic there. Basically, you just need to move out of the group when you get this debuff because it'll pull people towards you and also do damage. You know, it's obviously a big area, so it's pretty easy to see when you have this debuff and bail out, so not a huge concern there. Overall, this fight is pretty boring without the actual chain lightning mechanic because that is the main instant kill mechanic, is why I made this a medium difficulty. But once that's fixed, I think it'll be more fun. But as of right now, it's, you know, it's a pretty easy boss, and you can see I got the debuff here, just chilling, spamming Moonfire, and I've noticed watching this that I'm clicking on some of my abilities. By the way, before you roast me like crazy, this is my first time playing Feral with any of these runes or anything like that. I leveled Resto, so like, I don't know why I'm clicking. All right, I'm fair to be roasted there, but yeah, anyway. This is where we start to see a ramp up in difficulty. So this is the Menagerie. Now I'm going to talk through what each of these do as quickly as I can, and hopefully that'll give you an understanding of how these are interacting. So first off, you've got the dragon. Now I'm off tanking this, and I think I will, you'll see the strategy continue. But the dragon will randomly do a fire breath where he'll target a player. You can see it right here. He targeted like the melee. He'll target a player, do a fire breath. If you stand in that, you'll start getting a damage over time fire damage ability. So you don't want to take any stacks of that ideally, but 1 is probably okay. He'll also do fire on the ground. Sorry about that. He'll do fire on the ground as you move him around. So just continue to take him around. He'll keep breathing. Now when he reaches 75%, 50%, and 25%, he'll do an overheat, which essentially is this fire AoE aura. And you'll want to separate him from the other beasts during this time. Otherwise, you're going to want to keep him with the squirrel and the chicken and cleave them down together. Now, I didn't know exactly how this guy worked, which is why you see me tanking him out separately. This is when I thought that his overheat was time-based, but I don't think that anymore, and we'll confirm it on the video here. But that's the dragon. Now, the sheep, he does... Essentially, you want to stay away from at least 10 yards beyond the sheep's range, is what it seems like. He does basically a perma-stun if you get within that range. He also has a damage reflect, and that'll make the mechanical creature essentially look like they're on electric charged, basically. And that would just tell you don't attack them. You're going to reflect damage on yourself. If he does it close enough to the dragon will also get it. I assume that also happens with the sheep and the chicken. So here you'll see the overheat come out. And now you can see that he's red. The sheep is also red, which is telling me he was too close to the sheep when he casted it. So the sheep is getting some of that buff. You'll also see me make this mistake later with the squirrel and the chicken, where I think one of them will get the fire buff. So that's our first few here. Now, the chicken itself lays an explosive egg, which hopefully you'll see. Yeah, you see it right there on the bottom of my screen. Just have your DPS switch to that egg and kill it when it comes up. The chicken also does a cluck attack, and so this basically just boosts, it seems to boost the damage of the other creatures around him. So basically you're just going to want to be using some kind of cooldown probably at this point. So here's the overheat I was talking about, by the way. You can see the chicken's on fire there, and that means that I was too close as he casted the overheat, and that means it's doing fire damage to our melee as well. You can see all the damage everyone's taking. So as he's hitting that 75, the dragon is hitting 75, 50, 25%, back him out of the raid so that he doesn't get that buff. And then we've handled, the chicken as well now. Lastly, we have the squirrel. He'll do this bubble protection thing. You just want to move them out of it. It gives them a defensive shield and also does damage to you. And then there's an ability that the squirrel will cast, which I wasn't doing the kicking, so I don't know the name of it, but I'm sure you can see it if you pay attention to the video. But the squirrel will do this ability. You just want to kick it because it does big damage as far as I understand it. So essentially, you're keeping the sheep away. You're bringing out the dragon when it does overheat. You're dodging the dragon's breasts. You're moving out of Widget Fortress. You're killing explosive eggs that come down, and you're interrupting the squirrel when it does its ability, and you're popping defensives on the cluck. So, and by the way, that's a spell reflection right there. That's what it looks like. Or not spell reflect, but just damage reflect on the sheep. So you're doing all these things at the same time. Here's the overheat at 25%. Again, you can see I'm too close to the chicken. It's on fire. But if you're handling this, you should be okay. Doing better than you can see how badly we're doing because we're still learning, and we did okay here. And then what you need to do is basically kill them all within 5 seconds of each other. And we get a little sloppy here, so maybe not the best example, but I think showing mistakes is one of the better ways to learn. So right now we're calling, hey, stop DPS on these and do more damage to the sheep. And so that's kind of what we're doing here. And killing the explosive egg. There's not a ton more to say beyond what I've explained. So I'm just going to let this clip roll out. Now, the last boss was a little sloppy. I'll go ahead and say it now. We did end up killing it. I did have to battle res our tank and innervate myself because I popped out to regrowth. This is a weird one to watch from my perspective, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and explain the boss real quick before I get into the video, since some weird things happen and I want to talk about them as they happen. So first off, this boss has 4 phases technically. It's got a fire phase, an ice phase, and like a poison phase. Now those first 3 phases, you need to get the boss to 50% HP, and then it'll go to the next phase, and there'll be like a 15-20 second intermission where you can heal up, kill the bombs, clean up, get ready for the next phase. So keep that in mind. Now for the first phase, he's essentially going to be doing a flamethrower that he'll cast, and essentially the tank wants to run away while that cast is happening and then kite him during the time of that cast. It's similar to a lot of the other fire effects like the dragon breath that you'll find here, where it puts a stacking fire debuff damage on you. And so this can stack very quickly, and what you'll see early on in our attempt here, that I pull aggro even though I waited, and it kind of just gets really messy. So I'm going to go ahead and play the clip and we'll see what happens. Sorry for the interruption. I wanted to make another note here because I don't believe I enforce it enough in these clips. So on this boss, there are pillars around the room. There's a mouth or a head on top of these pillars, and it'll open and start letting out bombs in every single phase. Now, the bombs will do different things in that phase, but it's important to have either multiple range assigned to clicking the button on the bottom of these pillars to close that mouth, or have some kind of strategy for handling it. I think we had 3 people doing it, and what happens is you take damage and you get mana when you click the button, but you also get I think it's a high voltage debuff, so you can't click them until like a 20-second debuff runs out. So at least have 3 people, maybe 4, being ready to click these, kind of spread out the room ideally. So I wanted to make mention of that. Also, we're using a Warlock tank who's not even tanking. He's just meta spec so that he gets instant searing pains, and he's just, his only job is to run around and hit these bombs. Now, if you have a mage or other classes and you have easy ways to shut these buttons off, I think you don't need to really go that far, but we're really heavy melee, so that's what we decided to do. And so first off, we're going ahead and start. I kind of didn't show the 5 seconds that we waited, but we did because I kept pulling aggro. It's because I don't have salve, probably something to fix. I was off tanking in case I needed to taunt, so I didn't have salve, but I think we would fix that next time because you're going to be taunting anyway, so salve isn't an issue. So anyway, he's charging up his fire attack, so now our tank is running him away, but this is when I should be concerned about threat. You can see my threat meters don't work, so I pull threat. Now, what I do is I walk away from the rest of the raid, so that's like all you can really ask for. And so I'm about to battle res this guy, but he's not actually dead. He's just a hunter. So we're immediately on the back foot here. You see I have 4 stacks. It's burning me for 440. You see a couple other people in the raid with 3 or 2 stacks. Now I'm really trying to watch my threat at this point. I've already done enough damage, and if I pull again, we're going to wipe. And we had just popped our world buffs for this, so I'm really not trying to throw this. So I'm really staying back. Unfortunately, so you can see I almost got my stacks refreshed there, which would have been really bad. But I'm just playing this super safe, trying to stay away. Now, our tank is going to end up going down here, and this is where it just gets insanely sloppy. So I go ahead and start healing. I put these stacks on these people, so I felt the need to help the healers out. And I go to heal the tank as well. Now I go cat, and as soon as I go cat, he gets murdered. And at this point, he's telling me to mana pot and taunt, so I mana pot and taunt, but he gets hit by the bomb right immediately, like as it comes down, so he just dies. So anyway, the boss is on me. I've taunted at this point. I'm running away with the buff. He's doing the flame thing. So this is what you want to be doing as a main tank, by the way. So that worked out totally fine. Now during this time, we're getting him down to 50%, and that's going to allow me to be res the tank and continue. Now, I want to step back for a second as there's so much going on, but the bombs, we have 3 people dedicated to hitting these bombs. So when the mouth opens, they're going and hitting the buttons. And we also have a Warlock in meta, even though he's not tanking, and that's for instant searing pain. So his job is only to run around killing bombs, and it worked out quite well. So I would encourage you to use that strategy if you don't have any mages or easy way to kill these bombs. They only have like 200 HP, so they're not hard to kill, and they'll die in 1 searing pain. Now for this next phase, he goes Frost, and what he'll do is he'll put a debuff on you that slows you by 10%, I think, per stack. But the big problem with that is he'll do some super cool smash. You can see it right here. And that does damage based on how many stacks are in the raid. It still hurts, but if you have fewer stacks, it'll do less. Now it is a magical debuff, and it's also a slow. So druids can shift out, you can hand to freedom. Free action potions are highly recommended here. If you use a free action potion in this phase and on the 4th phase, when he combines all of them together, you can avoid a lot of the damage here. So this one is relatively easy. Continue to kill the bombs, continue to hit the buttons as the mouths open. And you can also hit the buttons for mana. I think it converts about 600 or 700 health to mana. So you can still do that for your healers to sustain throughout this longer fight. So we're getting him close to 50% here. He's going to be transitioning into his poison phase. Now for the poison phase, there's really only one main mechanic you have besides sticking to hitting the buttons and having someone kill the bombs or multiple people kill the bombs. and that is ability called Toxic Ventilation. Now, it looks like DBM is working for this on my end. You can see me sitting here waiting, by the way. I'm very scared of ripping threat since the meters don't work. But you can see DBM showing Toxic Ventilation there, and he'll do like this little wind up with additional poison clouds, and then you'll see the kick on his portrait when our rogue kicks it. So right here it starts and then it fades immediately. You'll also see that buff if you use combat text, or debuff I should say, that you can also use. So that's really all there is to this phase. Now he's going to combine to all three other modes combined at the same time in the next phase, but I'll go ahead and just speed up this clip to get into that. Alright, and now we're getting set up for the fourth and final phase. As I've mentioned before, this is your combined phase. You're still going to want people to focus on hitting the buttons, and again, we have our Warlock killing the bombs, but mages are great for both bombs and buttons. We have none of those in our group, as I probably said earlier. Now, you're going to want to use your FAP here, just like you did on phase 2. You're also going to want to make sure you're kicking that Toxic Ventilation that we just talked about. So same strategy that we just used. I think honestly looking for that debuff is a really great way to interrupt that ability. And then dodging the Flamethrower like we talked about in phase 1. Once he starts casting, have your main tank run away. And I think really this phase and the first phase are really the challenging ones. Honestly, the second phase, Ice Phase, should be very simple because you're using a free action potion, and also there are so many ways to get out of it. You can dispel those debuffs as well. And the third phase really is honestly, there's basically no mechanic, right? As long as you have a quick kick, you probably only have to kick them twice, maybe 3 times in that phase. So these are the phases you're going to be looking at. I think if you can handle the fire mechanic well, then this is just going to be a non-issue boss for you. But make sure you're doing the buttons and the bombs, because if you're getting behind on those, that's going to cause a lot of your issues. But congratulations. Hopefully at this point you're ready to go clear Gnomer. But anyway, I'll go ahead and lead into my outro. And that's all I wanted to cover in the video. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Helps out the channel a ton. But good luck out there in Gnomer, and I'll see you next time. Cam out.